Welcome to Community Forum. My name is John Goliatino. I'm your host. This evening we're going to be talking to Joseph Da Silva Jr., who is the Democratic Town Committee Chair. And we're going to be talking about what the Democrats have got planned and going into this election cycle. And there might be some surprises and then maybe not. We always have something interesting, so hang around and watch us converse.
John, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was going to say thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. First of all, tell us a little bit about us, because there's, you know, the population, there's always turnover, 5% or whatever, since the last time you've been on. So tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your family, or where you went to school. And
I'm local. I grew up in Danbury.
Right.
I knocked on my first door in a political campaign when I was 9 years old and said, "Vote for my dad."
Right.
So I kind of grew up around the process. Obviously, I live in Danbury with my wife. I have 2 kids. In fact, we live right around the corner from here, from the studio.
Okay.
I was the town chair previously for a couple of terms. I took last term off. From 2009 and 10, I took off, or 2010 and 11, I took off. I just actually was elected chair again in March.
Right.
So.
And your profession?
I'm an attorney. By trade, I'm an attorney.
Okay.
So hopefully that's what I do to make a living. It depends on the week, but
it depends on the week as to how things are going.
It does.
Right. Okay, so what's going on with the Democrats? What is the cycle? You're just going through the preliminary cycle, just finished the preliminary cycle, I should say.
Did.
You know, we were talking before we went on. The process has been moved up. It used to be a little later, you know, so we're up by like 6 weeks or so from the way it used to be, roughly.
Yeah, 6 weeks to 2 months.
Yeah.
The process used to be that we would do our nominations in July, with primaries in September and an election in November. In 2006 was the first year this applied to state elections, and it doesn't apply to local. But they moved the primary up to August and moved the nominations back to May. So we actually just finished. The month of May was a very busy month of nominations for Congress, for U.S. Senate, for state representatives, state Senate, register of voters, and we actually appointed justices of the peace as well. So That was a busy month. We just finished all of that up just before Memorial Day holiday. And then the next big thing will be the primary in August.
Okay, so what primaries are going on as a result of the conventions?
In the 5th congressional district, in our congressional district, there's actually 4 primaries. There's a Democratic primary for Congress and a Democratic primary for U.S. Senate, and the Republicans also have a primary for Congress and for U.S. Senate. So,
okay, so on both sides.
Yes, both sides, both federal races. There will be primaries for both Congress and Senate in both parties, with multiple candidates for Congress in both parties.
In the state races from the local area, there aren't any problems.
There are no primaries that we're aware of locally for any of the state rep seats or the state senate seat in either party.
You say that you're aware of because they have a certain number of days after the convention, right?
Correct. And in addition to that, candidates who, if you had a contested convention and a candidate had received 15% of the delegates at the convention, they would be entitled to be qualified for the primary ballot if they wish to go on as of right. If they did not get 15%, there are ways to petition on as a challenger to do a petition route, which is the only route to get on if you're a single town state representative district and your town committee does your nomination as we do. The only way to challenge would be, force a primary challenge would be a petition route. Obviously, we're not aware of anybody who's taken out a petition. We do not expect any challenges. We didn't have any contested conventions. I'm not aware of the Republicans locally having one either. So I don't anticipate any local primaries. It's been a long time since we had one.
Right. And that danger, so to speak, goes away in a couple of weeks anyway.
And yes, absolutely. It may even be as soon as next week.
Yeah, it could be
And frankly, I don't think we've had a local state legislative primary in probably something in the vicinity of 18, 20 years. Yeah. Probably 1994 was probably the last time. Cappiello Belton in 94 for the 138th state rep district. It was probably the last one. I might be wrong, but I think that's the last one.
I think on the Democratic side, it was Tabersack versus Walkovich.
Farag Godfrey in 88 was probably the last one.
Oh, really? Okay.
For an open seat. The last time an incumbent was challenged was, yes, certainly 1984.
Oh, yeah, I'd forgotten about that one. Right.
Because that was the open seat to succeed Paul Garavelle in 88.
Right, that's true. I forgot about that
But it's been a long time.
Right.
And I don't expect that to change this year. So
where are we? Let's do like a survey. First of all, there's we have a slightly different makeup that we had in the past for our seats. In other words, we have more seats representing Danbury than we ever did, even if it's only a few streets.
we do. We do.
Maybe tell the viewers about that a little
Every
bit.
10 years, the Constitution of the United States requires that the U.S. complete a census.
Right.
Count everybody, or at least in theory, count everybody. As a function of the census, after the census is over, we get the population numbers. Our state legislative districts, House and Senate, are proportional. There was a Supreme Court decision in the 60s, one man, one vote. Each district needs to be proportional to each other.
Right.
So they all have to have roughly the same number of people within a certain percentage, and the
Right.
exact percentage escapes me off the top of my head.
Yeah.
There's a
It
small
might be a half a percent or something.
and maybe there's a small deviation criteria that they can use in between districts. But once the 10-year census is done, then 2 years later, we do a redistricting of our state, Senate, and House seats. We did it in 1992, we did it in 2002, now we did it in 2012, and there were some pretty significant changes here. Danbury and the surrounding towns grew to a certain extent, probably more so than the state as a whole. Danbury had, prior to 2002, Danbury had 3 state representative districts entirely within its borders, the 109th, 110th, and the 138th.
Right.
After 2002, Danbury was too big for 3,
Right.
but not quite big enough for 4. So they had moved the lines to 138th North a little into New Fairfield and
And then we got the second.
created the second district, which was part of Danbury, part of Reading.
Which was stolen from Hartford.
Correct.
They leave the numbers from the areas that it comes.
Which is the same reason why the 138th district is
came from,
138th, because that, I
Norwalk.
believe, came from Norwalk
Right.
in 2002. No, excuse me, 1992. 1992. So what they did is in 2002, they created the second district, which was part of Danbury, basically the southwestern corner of Danbury, part of Reading and part of Bethel.
Right.
This year, they changed.
We picked up a couple more, right?
Yes. They took part of the 108th seat, which was Kent, Sherman, part of New Milford, New Fairfield. Got rid of Kent, kept New Milford, Sherman, most of New Fairfield, and they gave it a little sliver of Danbury along.
How many streets?
Hard to count streets. It's about 1,000. It's about 800 voters, give or take, running along behind the prison and along Candlewood Lake, coming down as a finger behind Route 37, in between Route 37 and the lake. In addition, they also took a small piece of Danbury, even smaller piece than that, of Danbury in the northeastern corner by the Brookfield border, and moved that into the 107th district, which was Brookfield, about a third of Bethel, and now has a little corner of Danbury, literally less than 1,000 people. That one could probably be measured by streets if you actually had a list. It'd be short enough to read the streets. And then the second district, the 109th, 110th, stayed roughly similar. Just the lines changed a little bit here and there, but they remain substantially the same. The second district changed significantly. It gave up part of Danbury that it had. It picked up a little bit more of Bethel, and it picked up a piece of Newtown, and it still obviously has the piece of Reading that it always had. So that district actually now covers 4 towns, Danbury, Bethel, Reading, and Newtown.
It's a lot less Danbury than it was.
Yeah, about probably, my guess is about 1,500 fewer voters, but I'm doing that from memory, so I might be off by a little bit.
Mainly the downtown,
Yes, mostly the 6th Ward, part of the 6th Ward, Danbury, the downtown 6th Ward that the second had, now gave up.
Like Pleasant Street, I think.
Yes, in Belmont Circle neighborhood and part of Park Avenue. Has been moved ironically back into the 110th, which is where those neighborhoods had been in the first place.
Okay. So what issues do you see before we get into who the candidates are, for...
Well, I mean, the number one issue is obviously going to be the economy at every level, whether it's the state or the federal level. And it's going to be the driver of the presidential race. It's going to be the driver of the Senate race, the congressional races. and even our local races.
Yeah, the posturing's already started. Oh, you know, you're not doing enough. You know, we got to be a little more free if you listen to one side, and then the other side, well, you know, we got to pay the bills, and we haven't paid the bills for years, you know, as much as we should have.
That's
Let's
absolutely
put it this way. There was a lot of bonding going on by the Republican governors.
And Republican presidents.
Yeah.
The national debt exploded under Ronald Reagan and exploded again under George Bush. George Bush was handed a surplus in 2000 when President Clinton left office. He squandered it immediately with a tax cut that the rich didn't need, and then had to pay for 2 wars, and for the first time in history had 2 wars going without any way to pay for it. There's one, it stands logic upon its head.
And the Social Security Trust Fund was rated to help pay for that. So
we've borrowed against the trust fund, but borrowing implies payment, and we haven't made that payment. So that's absolutely true. That's clearly another issue.
So we have problems across the board with shortfalls here and there, but maybe running a war without paying for it has a lot to do with it.
Probably ill-advised. Not just one, but 2.
Yeah.
Probably ill-advised, without any question. Certainly in the context of simultaneously passing a massive tax cut that most of the people who got it, the ultra and uber rich, certainly didn't need.
Right.
And there's no reason why, you know, Mitt Romney should be paying less taxes than you, I, or pretty much anybody watching this TV show. And he is. His marginal tax rate is lower than what we're all paying.
Right.
By and large.
Somehow or other, when they say reforming the code, it never seems to, you know, trickle down to the average Joe taxpayer.
Well, it depends on who's reforming the code. Republicans only want to reform the code in one way,
that's what I'm talking.
And that's to protect a very narrow group of people.
Right.
Which has been, Governor Malloy made a very good point about 1.5 years ago when he first took office. We cannot cut or tax our way out of this economic problem that we're in, this economic morass. It has to be a balance. It has to be a blend. It can't be all of one or the other.
Right.
And too often, the Republicans only want to cut. They refuse to consider any revenue sources, especially any revenue sources that, God forbid, impacted the rich. And we're not talking about people who are affluent, people who might be making a couple $100,000 a year. The taxes we're talking about are taxes on people like
millionaires,
billionaires, millionaires.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett's not wrong when he says he should not be paying less taxes than his secretary, but he is. His secretary pays a higher rate of income taxes than he does. That makes no sense.
The last month I've had that conversation a couple of times. It's not the $200,000 a year people.
No.
You're not rich.
No.
You know,
certainly not around here.
Yeah, the wealthy are over $1 million. You know, and their marginal tax rates, if they're set up right, are lower than the middle class people.
Mm-hmm. Without any question.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it A, doesn't make any sense, B, isn't solving any problems, and C, probably most importantly of all, it's not fair to the vast majority of people that are carrying a burden, carrying more of a burden than should be their obligation, because others who have the capacity aren't, and have frankly shifted that burden onto them over the last 30 or 40 years aggressively, and are trying to continue to do so under a national Republican philosophy that just literally makes no sense. I ran into a neighbor who I'm friendly with over the weekend, and we were briefly discussing politics. And he's been a Republican most of his life, and said, who in their right mind would register as a Republican today? Nationally, they're crazy. They even make no sense. That was his words, not mine. Alan Simpson was a congressman or senator from Wyoming.
Yeah.
Made that same point last week, that this rigid, reflexive resistance to any source of revenue has to stop. It's killing our ability to fix anything in Washington, especially when coupled with the National Republicans' reflexive resistance to They only want to cut what they want to cut. They only want to cut things that actually impact people.
Let's cut Medicare. Let's cut Social Security. Let's cut
food stamps. Let's cut school lunches.
Yeah.
Let's cut teacher pay.
But let's not do anything about defense
Or subsidies for oil companies.
Right.
Or things that protect major corporations, or farm subsidies that really only affect and really only benefit massively large farming conglomerates. They don't affect actually any farmers. So those are the only things they want to cut. So God forbid, even if you wanted to cut in order to try to put our fiscal house in order, all of their priorities are out of whack anyway.
Yeah, the farm subsidy will never get touched because, and most farmers today are wealthy. They're not making $200,000 a year. They're making well over $1 million on the farms that are left, because they're all combines.
Well, because there's very few individual family farmers anymore.
Exactly.
They're mostly all factory farms run by major corporations, and those are the people to whom those farm subsidies disproportionately assist. No different than gas and oil subsidies don't help the guy trying to run the local gas station, who's impacted by high gasoline prices just as much, if not more, than the public.
And he's lucky he's making a penny a gallon.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, without a doubt. And I mean, but Shell and Exxon or ExxonMobil, whatever the name of the company is, and these companies are making massive billions and billions of dollars in profit. Yet, I was excited today because I saw gas for $3.78 or 9 cents a gallon.
It's dropped down.
Fabulous, except for the fact that, why am I excited? I have $3.79 a gallon gasoline. I'm pretty sure when President Clinton left office, gas was around $1.50 a gallon. Somehow, the oil president turned out to be the oil president, all right, in the pocket to the oil companies. We elect a president with an oil background. We elect a vice president who worked for Halliburton.
Right.
And what did George Bush and Dick Cheney leave us? With $3 more a gallon. That was the impact. That was the effect. And now we get excited when it's $3.75. And if it went to $3.50, we'd be ecstatic. Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me that we continue to subsidize companies that are selling us their product for $3.50 a gallon. I think they're making enough money. We want to subsidize something. I'm sure there's mom and pop businesses out there that we could subsidize or help to a much greater degree that would actually do things that stimulate the economy rather than impede it.
And there is an award that they don't like. It's always like a case, let's get involved over here, let's get involved over there,
Oh, without any question.
Yeah.
Without any question.
And we're always protecting some conglomerate. That's one of the things that's probably not going right with the economy, which is not talked about a lot, is the fact you have so many monopolies or near monopolies that people look the other way.
Frequently true. Frequently true. And at the end of the day, the use of American power is never an easy decision. We hope, and foreign policy obviously is complex, we hope our leaders do it in a thinking manner and do it in a way that we can pay for it. And the biggest impact over the last 12 years has been, and thankfully President Obama has wound down the war in Iraq, is winding down Afghanistan, is bringing our troops home. Because that's who the impact has been on, is soldiers and their families.
Right.
And now they come home and the Republicans in Congress want to cut programs that help veterans. Which just stands logic.
Doesn't make any sense.
No.
You're cutting benefits when they're coming home.
Right. It just makes, that literally makes no sense. It stands logic on its head. And it's mean-spirited, it's wrong, both philosophically and politically. It just makes no sense. The greatest expansion of the American economy in history occurred after World War II, after the GIs came home, after they got settled, after they started getting married, going to college, having families, building houses, a lot of which they did on their GI Bill benefits.
The GI Bill, which was called a welfare program.
Right, which was passed and enacted by a Democratic president.
Right.
To benefit the GIs who came home from World War II, and it led to the greatest peacetime expansion of commerce, wealth, the middle class, and generalized widespread prosperity in American history, actually in world history. And that lasted from the early 50s into the mid-70s before that boom really started to taper off. And things started very much so collecting back into a very stratified wealthy tier, and the middle class started retreating and retrenching.
Right.
But a lot of that was built upon things like the GI Bill that we did after World War II to help those GIs come back and reestablish lives that were interrupted. It's one thing to interrupt your life if you're Ted Williams and you go to war and you come back.
Right.
It's another thing if you're the kid from Danbury.
Right.
Those GI benefits were important. And I went to college with guys who were, had some military benefits.
Right.
From Desert
to help
Storm.
pay for the tuitions.
Absolutely.
And get them to school.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we need to do that again. We need to do that at a much larger scale.
But if you listen to the rhetoric, it's like, well, that's welfare.
Right. Right.
If it moves the economy, I don't see how it's welfare.
Well, and it's not welfare if you're doing it for somebody who gave however many years of their life or limbs for this country. That's hardly welfare in the traditional sense of the word.
And you can say it's a capital investment in the mines to have the country move better.
No different, frankly, than education funding in general is a capital improvement project, really, in our young people and our kids. Right now, for example, I mean, capital improvement is the way to do things right now in this economy. We haven't paid a lot of attention to our infrastructure in this country, our highways, our roads, our bridges. The president has discussed the creation of an infrastructure bank that can help fund those projects for states and local governments. And once again, because it involves a government expenditure that doesn't benefit an oil company, Republicans in Congress are not in favor of it, even though they were in favor of it as recently as 5 or 10 years ago, at least in favor of the concept.
Let's shift the focus now back to local, because we've probably got maybe 7 minutes or something like that. In the 1st District, we've got, I believe, Carter.
The 2nd District.
That's what I say. Second District is what I meant to say.
Dan Carter's an incumbent, Republican from Bethel.
Right.
He won 2 years ago. He narrowly defeated State Representative Jason Bartlett.
Right.
In the 2nd. We have a candidate. His name's Steve DeMoro. He's a lifetime Bethel resident.
Danbury lawyer.
He's an attorney in Danbury.
But he is from Bethel.
He's an attorney in Danbury. Practices law here in Danbury. He and his wife live in Bethel. He grew up in Bethel. Played soccer at Bethel High School. I'm not entirely sure that it was designed to elicit the support so much as boos and hisses in the room, but it was pointed out at his nominating convention that he probably scored more goals in soccer against Reading, Newtown, and Danbury than anybody else in the history of Bethel, which I don't know that it went over so well, but it was a nice point. It attested to his athletic skill, at least. Steve's a good guy. I've known him for a long time. He's a friend. He's smart. He's energetic. He's young. He gets it. He wants to participate in public life. He wants to get more involved. He eagerly sought this out when he was very eager, very excited to do this. I think he's going to wage a really aggressive campaign. He'll be out there door knocking and talking to voters. He's already started doing that. And I think it'll be a refreshing new candidate to offer to the voters of that district.
Yes, I think he'll, especially since he's from Bethel.
Yep.
He'll resonate with the Bethel, and Bethel's important as much as or more important than what's left over in Danbury.
It's 50% of the district.
Yeah.
Bethel, it's 50% of that state representative district is Bethel voters.
Right.
I'm not sure about the population breakdown because districts are done by population, not voter registration.
So it's about 25% Danbury, and then the rest is the balance?
More or less. Of 14,000 registered voters, 7,000 plus or minus are Bethel.
Right.
About 3,500 are Danbury, and the balance are Reading and Newtown.
Oh, okay. So
it's about 600 voters in Newtown and 22,000 in Reading or so.
Right. Now, let's go over and our longtime friend, Bob Godfrey, in the 110.
Bob is running for re-election.
Right.
Full disclosure, I'm his treasurer and his campaign manager.
Okay.
So.
And he's been there a long time.
Yes, he has.
He's been on the show here.
He has, more than once.
Right.
My guess is he will be here again this summer.
Yes.
Bob is running for re-election. I am very confident.
Deputy Speaker.
Deputy Speaker of the House. Deputy Speaker of the House. He has been Deputy Speaker several times for several terms. Prior to that, he was a Deputy Majority Leader.
Right.
Bob has a leadership role in the House. He's always been there for Danbury, not just Danbury, but the area in general. Whether it's been Candlewood Lake or Danbury Hospital, which is no longer a Danbury facility, it's really a regional thing. And Bob was instrumental in working and trying to work with the hospital in the state of Connecticut to get them the certifications to run their cardiac surgery center. He's done work and been aggressive to help try to protect Candlewood Lake, especially with the deregulation of electrical power. So CLMP had to sell off the lake. And senior citizens
has been a big supporter of senior citizens.
Been a huge supporter of education and kids, and
right.
a very strong supporter of senior citizens, whether it be con-PACE funding or other programs that benefit seniors, especially seniors in health care and their access to health care or their access to the benefits they've earned.
Right.
He's been very aggressive in doing those things for a long time. That's been his focus for his whole legislative career.
I just got the flash. We got a couple minutes. So
Okay.
We've got the 109 with a big change going on.
We do have a big change. Unfortunately, Joe Tabersack is not running for re-election. We were hoping he would. Joe's been a great state rep. We're sad to see him go. It's not permanent, but he's got a young family.
He's young, a young family, and they need additional money, so he's got to.
And time.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of time away from a 10-month-old baby.
Right.
And I have 2 young kids. I get that. My daughter's 2.5, and my son's 6 months old. So
right.
I understand how he wants to spend that time at home, and it's conflicting priorities. But we were lucky. We got a great new candidate.
Okay.
David Arconti Jr. is running. David's new to politics, not new to Danbury, grew up here. Obviously, his family's local. He's got deep ties to the community. His uncle Gino was a mayor of Danbury. His cousin was Gene Eriquez, who was the mayor of Danbury. Right. His uncle Tom was a candidate for mayor, was a former city council president. So David himself ran for the city council last year.
Right.
Did very well. Was very well regarded by people that he met, that talked to me, by people that he ran with. Everybody liked him. He worked very hard. And he's a good guy, smart, degree in public health from Southern. Very interested in healthcare.
We're running out of time, so I know the other races are pretty much, they're the candidates are from other towns.
Correct.
Could you give the town committee website?
DanburyDemocrats.net.
Okay. And is there a telephone number at the headquarters?
203-778-3116.
Okay, they're waving to me. So thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, John.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to the community forum. See you next week, same time, same station. We'll have another interesting program. Good night for now. We'll see you then.